Welcome back to For Real. My name is Claire and today I'm going to be talking to you about teaching English in Cambodia. This has been a much promised video on my part and I finally got around to making it, so let's get started. I'm going to cover 4 topics in today's video, so I'll just run through what those are so you know what to expect. First thing, I'm going to talk to you about qualifications and acronyms. Second thing is types of schools that you'll find in Cambodia. The third thing is pay and conditions. And the fourth thing is finding a job. So without further ado, let's talk about qualifications and acronyms. So you might have heard TEFL, TESOL, TESL, and you might wonder what the hell's the difference between those 3 things. Basically, they all are to do with teaching English. And TEFL stands for Teaching English as a Foreign Language. TESOL stands for Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages, and TESL is teaching English as a second language. So you can see they're all very, very similar, and where the difference comes in is the location that you're actually doing the teaching. So TEFL is basically what you would be doing in Cambodia because you're teaching English as a foreign language. So that means the students have their own language and the one that you're teaching them, which is English, is a foreign language to them. Whereas if you were in Australia or in the UK or the US or wherever, and you're teaching a group of students English who are from non-English speaking backgrounds, then you'll be teaching them as speakers of other languages or teaching English as a second language. So really, the teaching bit is the same. It's just about where you're doing it. The qualification is the same, no matter which one of those it is, which one it's called. It doesn't matter. If you're doing an in-person qualification, and you're doing it in your country before you leave, then you're more likely to have a range of students, as in students from a range of different cultural backgrounds and speaking a range of different languages. Whereas if you come to Cambodia and do your qualification in Cambodia, then all of the students, or the bulk of the students that you're going to be teaching, will all be Cambodian. So it just depends whether you want that diversity in the classroom, or whether you want to teach just Cambodian people when you do your qualification, that is. Anyway, moving on. IELTS is another acronym that you might come across. Now, IELTS stands for International English Language Testing System. And IELTS is what you need if you're not a native English speaker and you want to go to university or you want to apply for citizenship in another country that speaks English. Often you'll need to show a certain standard or certain scores in IELTS. So particularly for university entry, it's a very, very regimented thing, and you've got to have, if you're coming from a country where you're not speaking English as your first language, you need to show that you have a certain proficiency because you need that level of proficiency in order to succeed in the program. So IELTS is a particular skill, particular style of testing, and some of the schools that you'll find in Cambodia do actually teach IELTS preparation as one of their courses. So it's just something that you might come across when you're looking at that sort of thing. All right, next one, CELTA. CELTA is a high-level English language teaching qualification, and it's underwritten by the Cambridge University. And it's, what can I say about it? I did one of those. It cost me about 2,000 Australian dollars, and it was possibly the most intense 4 weeks of my life. It's a really great course. You'll learn heaps of stuff if you do it. And I think with these courses, you really do get what you pay for. Yeah. If you have any questions about CELTA, just ask. You can do CELTA on the ground in Cambodia. ACE is the one school that is qualified to offer that. So I'll leave links to all of this stuff and you can check it out if you're interested. All right. Moving on to topic number 2 is types of schools that you'll find in Cambodia. So the first one is accredited international schools. And these are ones where students go and they do their full curriculum there. So they're not just there for English, they are there for the full breadth of the curriculum. And these accredited international schools will teach either the UK system, the US system, Australian sometimes. Sometimes they teach IB, which is the International Baccalaureate, but they're all accredited to teach those curricula. So that means that students who finish or graduate from those schools can apply for university entrance, things like that, because it's standardized as an international curriculum that's well known and well respected. So you can teach in one of those, but you're going to need to have a teaching qualification in your home country in order to do that. Some of them may have English teaching positions available, but again, I think you're going to need a higher level qualification than just simply a TEFL. I did consider teaching in one of those schools as an option when we went to Cambodia, but I just decided that it wasn't the option that I wanted to take. Okay, the second one is international schools that are not accredited. So these are the ones that you'll see. They tend to be quite small. They might have the word international in their name, but they're not really proper international schools. That doesn't mean that they're not doing great work and, you know, can be good places to work, but they're just not going to be as well resourced as the accredited schools, and they're not going to pay you as well. But having said that, they're going to be easier to find a job in. So those ones are ones to look out for. The third one is English schools like ACE. So these are schools that are set up just to teach English, and they are usually found quite close by to really big high schools because they feed from there for their student body, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So what happens is that students go to the normal Cambodian school for most of their classes, then they take time out and go to ACE to have their English lessons and then go back to the school, or sometimes they do it before or after school. So English schools like ACE. Number 4, you can teach online. So for things like Cambly and italki, there's you know, a whole range of places where you can teach English online if you want to. Just be aware that a lot of those places are very strict about the level of internet connection that you have. And if your internet drops out during a class, they tend to look very, very unfavorably on that. So I would be looking for an apartment that has a generator if you're looking at teaching online, just because they often give you strikes for that sort of thing, and then, you know, you're less likely to get new students, you're less likely to be recommended, things like that. So if that's going to be your gig, just make sure that you have really good internet that can support that work. Number 3, yes, this is an important one, pay, or how you're paid. So I guess how you're paid is almost as important as how much you're paid. And by how you're paid, I mean, are you paid by the hour for the hours that you teach, or are you going to be paid per month? So there's pluses and minuses for both of these things. Let's look at when you're paid by the hour first. Okay, so when you're paid by the hour, you can have sometimes 2, 3, 4 hours between classes, and when you're not teaching, you're free to come and go as you like. There's no requirement for you to stay on the campus. There's no other kind of duties that you need to perform. So you can go out, do what you want to do, and then come back and do your classes. So that is one of the positives. Another of the positives is that the pay tends to be a little bit higher for those sorts of schools. The third one, you have potential to earn even more money because it's an hourly rate, and if teachers are away sick or whatever and they need to cover those classes, or if they have a teacher shortage and there's permanent kind of need for classes to be covered, then you're going to get paid more because that'll be adding on to your hours that you've taught. So you can actually, you know, earn quite a good amount of money per month if you take on lots of extra classes. And I know some people do that. They just kind of save up all of their money, don't do much during term time, and then go on kind of big holidays in the breaks between the terms. The hourly rate is only for teaching time. This is a negative because you've still got to do your planning and your marking and all of the other things that go along with lesson preparation, all that photocopying and cutting out words and, you know, stuffing around, making little things for people to do in class. So all of that has to happen outside of the hour that you're paid for. So when you think about all of that, it's probably halving your actual hourly rate that you're being paid. So it's not indicative of the amount of time that you actually need to put in to earn that money. So just bear that in mind, that those things aren't included. You don't get paid for public holidays. Cambodia has a lot of public holidays, and if you are paid by the hour, there are no classes on those days and you don't get paid. So that's something to consider as well. Another positive that I failed to mention is that if you are required to attend meetings, they'll also pay you for that. So you'd be surprised how few meetings there are when people actually have to pay you to attend them. So that's a good thing, I think. All right, let's look at when you're paid by the month. So when you're paid by the month, public holidays don't impact on you because it's a monthly rate, regardless of whether there's 5 public holidays in that month or none, you still take away the same amount of money. So consistency is definitely there if you're paid by the month. The pay does tend to be a little bit lower for these sorts of schools. Generally, it's not looked upon well if you leave during the day. I don't know whether there's hard and fast rules that say you cannot leave the school grounds, but you are pretty much expected to be there from start to finish. And if there's cover required, then you can be asked to do that without any additional pay because they basically own you for that time. And also other duties and things like meetings, you'll have more meetings because they're not paying you for them. Not paying you any extra, I should say. So yeah, something to consider there. So the actual pay, when I was working at ACE, I was being paid, I think it was around $25 an hour. And with the hours that I was teaching, it ended up being about $1,800, this is US dollars, for the month. If you're paid by the month, it can be anything from, I don't know, $400 or $500 all the way up to like $1,500 for the month. Just depends on the school, obviously. All right, let's have a look at number 4, finding a job. I won't spend too much time on this because I really think that Google is your best friend when it comes to finding a job. You can Google schools in Siem Reap, schools in Phnom Penh, whatever. You can find all of that information online. I would be an advocate of emailing the school and then following up with an in-person visit once you get there. I think that the better the school is, the more likely they are to respond to an email, and it gives you a sense of I guess how professional they are too. If they're not going to respond to an email, then perhaps you would be questioning whether that's the kind of institution that you want to work for. But as you know, everybody says, you know, walking around with your CV and going to schools, the in-person approach is definitely one that you can take. I personally had success with dropping my CV into ACE, and then I followed up with an email and organised an interview, and I think I was offered a job there before we actually moved to Cambodia, so they can pave the way for that kind of stuff too. Another thing to look out for is like extras, things like, do they help with the work permit? Are they kind of resourced to do that? Do they have any other benefits like medical insurance, things like that? Sometimes those kinds of things will be included, just depends on the school and depends on what they generally include in a contract. You'll usually be asked to sign a 12-month contract, and I guess you can negotiate shorter, but I'm not really aware of people who've managed to do that. Working part-time isn't really a thing in Cambodia. I did ask if I could do that before I actually quit my teaching job because I felt like the hours, I had to work 6 days a week, I should say as well. I felt like the hours were quite long. I found it exhausting with those big breaks between classes. So sometimes I'd have 3-4 hours between classes. And even though you can leave, it's difficult because you kind of know that you have to go back and you have to kind of ramp yourself up into that space where you can be in front of a class. And doing that multiple times in a day, I found personally to be quite exhausting. And doing it 6 times a week was just like, that was not kind of what we went to Cambodia for. So find something that fits with you, but just be aware that you might not be able to organise part-time, although there may be more flexibility with that since COVID. Okay, I hope I've covered some things that you haven't thought about before. If you have questions about this, by all means leave them down below and I will attempt to answer them. It's been fun. Thanks very much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.